Hey, I'm Pops, and let's talk about Superman Legacy. I've been teasing a little bit about some of the different film and TV projects that DC has announced, kind of revisiting some of the comic books. Links will be in the descriptions on a couple of those. First up, let's get to what James Gunn has said about Superman. He was always going to be the writer, but he's also now confirmed he's going to be directing.
Okay, next up is the big one, the true beginning of the DCU. This is called Superman Legacy. This is being written by me. I'm in the middle of it. I'm having a great time doing it. And Superman will be released into theaters July 11th, 2025.
All right, so the headlines really kind of got there, and I think everybody's like double dipping on the headlines because it was really kind of presumed that and implied that Gunn was going to write and direct the Superman, which is actually one of the negatives for me because I didn't see Gunn as the director, a good choice as director. And Gunn initially, back with the Suicide Squad, said I initially said no because I didn't have any way in and felt unique and fun and emotional, gave Superman the dignity he deserved. He wrote this on Twitter. So then a bit of less than a year ago, I saw a way in many ways centering around Superman's heritage, how both his aristocratic Kryptonian parents and his Kansas farmer parents inform who he is and the choices he makes. And he talked about writing and directing, but he explains that just because I write something doesn't mean I feel it in my bones, visually and emotionally, enough to spend over 2 years directing it, especially not something of this magnitude. But the long and short of it is, I love the script, and I'm incredibly excited as we begin this journey. So he's moving on. This will be the project without Henry Cavill. It is definitely confirmed. He's talked about it on Twitter. Everyone's really excited about that. Talked about the ties because it's releasing on around his dad's birthday, so things like that. What is intriguing here is that it's been promoted around the imagery from All Star Superman by Grant Morrison, the art by Frank Quitely. It's unique art, interesting. It's a great miniseries, about 12 issues. It's fantastic. Read, short read, fast read. And I say legacy, and it's appropriate name in that context because it moves quickly through. Like this one page tells you all of Superman's origin. Really, really fast read. Before you get to Metropolis and you have all of these different stories and subplots and different elements that have taken place where there's a mission to the sun and Luthor is tied to the science, of course. Luthor has lied. And what happens is Superman basically takes on too much exposure. And here he has shown to have too much power. Like we don't even know where it begins and ends. And the scientists that help is basically that you're on overload. You're basically going to die. Everything is like fireworks, like it's just completely imploding on itself. And Luthor is obviously way more powerful and stuff than everyone's giving him credit for. He's definitely an interesting version in this comic issue compared to other stuff. And when we see Clark, we do get a great dose of the Clark Kent that we like. He's late for work. Why? He's saving a kid in front of a bus, and he's bumbling and fumbling around and doing different things. And then, of course, issue 1 ends with his big reveal of I'm Superman Lois. Well, that takes us to issue number 2, which centers around Lois because he takes her to the Fortress of Solitude for her birthday. He has special plans for her. He's exposing her to his world. And then ultimately, she's fearful because she doesn't understand what this machinery is, this tech is, that is there basically to make her a super suit. He's going to give her superpowers for a day. But she actually blasts him with this ray. It's kind of fun. And you have other cameos of different characters, like Samson, Atlas, things like that. Superman is really exposed how powerful he is. And then, of course, there's this great moment with them kissing on the moon. That's the moment he's always wedded, right? And she's drawn, beautifully, very elegant, very regal. And then the series kind of moves very quickly through different subplots and key elements throughout all of the Superman history, right? We have sort of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen episode, right? So Superman kind of turns pretty dark because of the exposure to black kryptonite. You have this version of Doomsday who shows up. I can't stand the art on the Doomsday and the design on the Doomsday, by the way, but that's what happens. You have a Parasite that shows up. You have this part with Parasite, which is fun during an issue where Clark has to interview Luthor in the prison, and Parasite's loose. That's pretty cool, pretty fun. He's there to kill Luthor, but obviously Clark is caught up in the middle of it, and he's secretly using his powers and stuff to try to save everyone. You have a Crypto episode, which I think is very, very great. and how they approach sort of like the lore and the legacy of crypto. You have a Bizarro episode, so you have an issue that deals with that. And then you have issue number 10, which is possibly one of the best issues, single issues. I mean, it fits inside of a limited series. It does advance the story, but in a way, it can almost read on its own. And you have Superman sitting on his chair, really contemplating this is it. And it's like a day in a life of Superman. And he has time with Lois, who basically puts herself in harm's way so he could be there. I don't care for the damsel in distress, but he saves a girl trying to commit suicide. And then it ultimately culminates with Superman's dad. And I think the problem that I have with the idea of the movie is I worry that so much of that is what the goal is. The goal is to figure out how to do away with Superman and move on from Superman. And DC wants to try to find a way to move away from that. And this is the story they've grabbed onto. And Gunn is willing to kind of put himself there to do that. I'm not a big fan of that. I think the source material has some fun elements in it. I think there's a good twist in the story there that could be useful and interesting, and there's some interesting character designs and things like that that Gunn would enjoy, like Parasite, the Bizarro, things like that. I don't know how much they want to try to cram into a single film, though. The arc of this Grant Morrison story being 12 issues is kind of a lot of material that runs in a lot of different directions because, again, legacy is a word that it was hard to get my head around when it was announced. But reading through the source material again, revisiting All Star, I realized there's so much that's packed in these issues that kind of touch on the tone and tenor of the Superman for generations, not just a few minutes, like literally years of comic books are packed into this miniseries. So where does that leave me? Well, I would say I'm still pretty skeptical. I don't have a problem with Gunn writing the script. I would have a problem with Gunn writing the final script. I would think that I would love to see an experienced filmmaker come in, take what Gunn has, maybe make a few tweaks, make it their own, bring the honor, dignity, and elegance that Superman kind of needs to bring to the DCU. Like he needs to bring hope. He needs to have bright. And we had this great speech from Henry Cavill at the end of 2022 with the Henry cameo scene being promoted and all of that. And I don't understand why we're going to try to drive in a circle and get there if it's not financial. I still go back to that. I still think a lot of this is being driven by finances. And I just want a good movie. I want a good Superman movie. I don't think anything has held a candle to Superman 78. I have a lot of problems with Man of Steel. Some people like it. I really don't care for anything post Man of Steel much at all. I think the Superman in those movies is mediocre, is being kind in my opinion. I can't stand Superman in those movies. I don't see anything that's interesting in that character. I see a great version on screen. I see he looks like Superman. I think the Black Adam scene with the curl and the music and him confronting Black Adam was fine, but it's like that's where I want the movie to start. Like I'm ready for the movie now. It's like I was so let down by that. So here we are, and I will put this in the hopeful category. I'm not high on it. I'm not, oh, seems like an awful idea category. Source material is great. I'm not totally sold on Gunn being the best person for the job, but I at least have hope that there could be a good story to work with. So, love to hear your thoughts. I will continue to work through some of the other announcements and revisit some of the source material and things like that before we get there. Things like Waller, the Lanterns, obviously the Paradise Island, Game of Thrones thing. Oh gosh, that in the category of bad, that's probably the one that looks the worst to me. That seems like a just absolutely awful, awful film. So those are my thoughts. I'm Pops. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Right?